Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Constructive Criticism. I'm your host, Spencer, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Gold Pro John Stern.
Hey, guys.
And Hall of Famer Seth Manfield.
Hello, everyone. How's it going?
It's going well, man. This set looks so sweet.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm stoked. I was just playing it a bunch yesterday and streaming. There's so many new cards to be thinking about, especially for Standard.
Well, we're going to get into those today, because today we're going to talk about some top fives. Actually, it's a top five, a top six, and a top seven. But it's because the set's so good. It's so hard to narrow things down. We want to talk about them all. So we're going to talk about cards today. But before we do that, we want to thank our sponsor at Oasis Games. You can check them out at mtgoasis.com, and you can get 15% off of your first order by using the code CCMTG at checkout. And you can get 4% off of every order by using the code Would That Be Good. Oasis is pretty amazing. I just was there yesterday. They have everything you need in Magic. I highly recommend that you check them out. You can also check out the rest of the network at constructorcriticism.com, see the podcasts that are going on. And if you want to support the podcast directly, you go to patreon.com/ccmtg. I want to thank our three newest patrons. We have Alex H., Sergio R., and Magic with Zuby, which is another Magic the Gathering podcast. So thank you so much to all of them. We really appreciate them.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah. Keep going.
So one of the things that is a benefit when you're a patron is you can enter in to ask the question for our hashtag Always Improving segment to help our listeners improve. This week our question says, I've recently been struggling with getting upset when playing Magic. This has felt new to me as I'm typically a pretty calm person. I find that Magic has started to mean quite a bit in my life, and I don't really know how to handle losing right now. What are a couple of times that what are ways that you cope with being upset, and what do you do to avoid it? It also says, thank you so much for doing the show each week. I top-aided many PPTQ because of things that are said on this podcast. Your mindset of always improving has helped me change how I approach the game. So, first of all, thank you so much to this listener, Brian. And, so I'll go first if that's okay. Because I think that I don't know Seth and John super well, but they both seem like way calmer people than I am. And I am not a calm person. I typically wear my emotions on my sleeve and things like that. And Magic has really changed that about me, where because of that always improving mindset and because of how it impacts you, I've had to kind of change that about myself, that I have to separate a match of Magic from who I am as a person, from how I'm feeling in that exact moment, and really try and turn it into micro decisions and focus on the things that I control in those micro decisions rather than having this game or this match mean so much to me. And it's been really hard for me, but I do find that when I break things into smaller chunks, for me at least, it's been really helpful. And that's the first thing I would probably recommend to people. What about you, John?
So there's two different ways to approach this question, and I think we dealt with a similar question, which was about how to get over tilt so that you can play well in the next match kind of thing. But I think this question, it feels a little bit more, less about how to win at Magic, but maybe how to just deal with the emotional response to it. And maybe just how to be a better person in general. I think it's important that you can separate the fact that you're trying really, really hard to win at something from how you react to it. Whether you get what you want or you don't get what you want. I think that's a really important skill in life. And I guess that people, like when you work really hard and you feel you're good at something, there's an automatic sense of entitlement that comes with that. You just feel like you deserve something. But Magic is a game of percentages where, you do everything you can so that you have a 75% chance of winning instead of a 50% chance. And you still have to respect the fact that your opponent who maybe didn't work as hard, didn't play as hard, doesn't have the best cards in their deck, they still come to that match with a 30% chance to win. And they're entitled to that chance. And that's why people play Magic, because it's not just the best person who wins every time. I don't really have a specific coping mechanism except trying to understand what is making you upset and trying to address that. And understanding that Magic in this context is just sort of, it's like a subtext of life, but like you have the same situations in life where things get you frustrated and you have to deal with them in a good way.
Seth,
Yeah.
one of the things that this question calls out is the Magic started to mean a lot in their life. You know, I think that you being in the MPL and being in the Hall of Fame, it's very clear that Magic means a lot in your life. So how do you separate a given match from that meaning to you?
So it's tough, right? Like, we're talking about winning and losing, which if you play a match of Magic, like, you can always win or lose, right? But like, certain matches matter so much more than others. You know, like if I'm on stream and just like dirtling around and playing a match, like, okay, yeah, sometimes they can matter more than others. Like, but in general, like, that's going to be different than if I'm sitting in a Mythic Championships playing for a top 8. Like, why can't I just sub a loss from over here and, you know, just like mix and match, you know, so that I get the wins when I want the wins. And I think that's like the frustrating thing when you like, maybe it's just you've strung a bunch of wins together, right? Maybe you've won 8 matches or something. So you put yourself in this situation. Maybe you're in the top 8 of a tournament, an RPTQ or whatever, and then you lose the critical match or something like that. And that's when it can, I think, like, those are the matches that I think players are going to most remember, because it's just like, it's kind of a daggering match, or like certain matches stand out more, I think, in terms of winning and losing. For me, yeah, like you said, I have been, and to John's point about the randomization of Magic, like, you can always lose. You should never go into a match thinking, I'm just can't possibly lose, because that's just not true. You can lose to whatever. It doesn't matter what your opponent's playing. And that's just something you have to accept. That's something I've accepted. If I go to a tournament and prepare super hard, I can still lose. Like, losing is part of the game. And so it's just a mentality. Like, at a certain point, once you play a lot, you know, it comes, and it's just a natural thing. Like, you shouldn't go into a tournament or a game or anything knowing that if you lose, you're going to be super upset, because that's just unhealthy.
I also like to, you know, when you take a hard loss, right, and you're thinking after turn, what I always try to like bring it back to, was there something I could have done in my preparation to, you know, address this, or was there anything? And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes, as far as you can tell, you played correctly and things didn't go your way. But like, there's always things that I feel I can work on for the next tournament. So I just try to channel that energy into the next tournament. And that's sort of helped me a little bit.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think for me, it's always been about, first of all, putting yourself in similar situations over and over and over again. Seth talked about the, you know, Mythic Championship top 8, right? And it was really funny. I can't remember if I was talking to it might have been Paulo, but we talked about like the top 8 of a PTQ and how much that meant to me at the time. And then the person, I think it was PV, they said, well, eventually that won't matter to you, right? Like, it'll be something that you're used to, and it'll become a lot easier. And you look at people who have top 8 a lot of GPs like you two, and it still feels, you still feel something, right? But eventually it becomes something that you know that you've had this feeling before, you know you've succeeded with that feeling before, and you kind of just have to remind yourself of that. So, cool. Any other thoughts on this question before we move on?
Yeah, just on what you said, Spencer, like, I've had, in GP top 8s, I've had very different emotional responses to being in the top 8. And sometimes I've felt, you know, this is really important, I want to really focus. And other times it's just felt like this is another match. And I don't really know how to isolate why it's one way or the other sometimes. But it's interesting to see that, I think, at least for me. Well,
I wonder if there, I'm sure I am not a psychology expert, but I'm sure there's a reason for it, right? Like, that it is our body doing something, reacting to something. So we should probably figure out what that is. We'd be way better at Magic, John.
I mean, it's hard to take the emotions out of the game. We're emotional. Like, it's just a natural thing. There's no easy answer to a question like how to cope with losing. I mean, there's so many variables. It's just about, you have to, it's something that can't really be told to you. It's something you have to find within yourself. That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Cool. Well, let's move on to hashtag Always Improving. Hashtag Always Improving is the point of the podcast. We believe if you're not getting better, you're getting worse, and we want to do what we can all the time to improve ourselves. Everybody's journey of improving at Magic, kind of like Seth is saying, it's a personal journey. Like, you have to do what you can to improve. And this week, I'll go first. Really quick. So this week I worked on hashtag Quest for 10. For those who don't know, I did a YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel for constructive criticism where I post weekly videos, and right now I'm working on a Quest for 10. My goal is to get 10 wins with every major deck. I started before the new format came out so that I could kind of get used to it, make sure that like I was in a rhythm when the new set came out, before the Pro Tour and stuff like that. And I got to play some more blue-red Drakes and then do my video for it. And then I also, in addition to that, once I was done with that, played some best of one to kind of see like how do you build a deck differently for best of one. And it's something that I was telling one of our patrons when they asked me about my magic goals and things like that this week was, I think that it's really good for me right now in Magic, as I'm focusing so much on the podcast and on the content, to have different goals that are outside of qualifying for the Pro Tour. For so long in Magic, that was what I was trying to do. Then I became a dad, and now, my focus is elsewhere. But I still want to be improving and things like that. And having the rank system and having Quest for 10, I think, is really helping me see things that I haven't seen in a long time. So my record on Arena this last week, was 14-1 in draft, and 10-1 in constructed. And I really felt like I was becoming better at making Magic content and talking about my plays. And in addition to that, I felt like because I was better at that, I realized that I was doing it more. I was actually being an active participant in my game more than I had been in the past, which is something that I've been trying to work on for a long time. So it was really interesting to have an experience where I'm noticing my improvement, even though I'm not playing at the high levels that I used to be playing, going to Grand Prix, playing at the Pro Tour, playing day 2s of Grand Prix. I still was forcing myself to be accountable, and it was really helpful for me this last week.
How are you doing your Quest for 10? Are you playing the same deck over and over till you get 10 and then switching? Or is it...
So this one I didn't do that. I switched out some cards between the first 5 wins and the second 5 wins. And then
But the same archetype, though.
Correct. Yep. I need to get 10 wins with that archetype specifically.
Okay.
And that I'm going to do that for every archetype in standard through these videos. And then every major one, that is and I'll post a video that kind of defines what those will be, and so people at home can try it as well and try and improve their range and things like that as well.
So for me, a couple things. If you've been following me, you may not realize that I was invited to the streamer event yesterday, and that was something that I've been dedicating a decent amount of my prep time to, not just the technical support. Like, I was streaming yesterday for 16 hours. Like, that's just an absurd amount of time that I didn't realize that, like, it was just mind-boggling to me, and I just stayed on stream.
Was that your plan, or did you just do you just not lose track of time, or are you gonna do all day? So
I knew that the event, I think, was 16 hours. I was planning to not do it that way, but then a lot of the viewers just came late at night. I got up over 800 viewers on my channel, and that was just I was just all right, if I had
it's staying on.
Heck yeah,
going. Let's go. Let's keep talking, And it was awesome. It was a great experience for me, and I'm really happy to kind of be getting into this, because I think that was my first kind of view into, wow, this could be an amazing thing. And I've been somewhat skeptical about the idea of streaming as a potentially full-time thing until now, and now I'm wow, this is something I can do daily and enjoy it. And so as far as the stream prep, it was some technical stuff as far as my bots and my this and my that and looking good, and then also the decks, right? Because it was a streamer event, that means that I had a couple people in our group on Facebook present decks to me, and that was super helpful, because it meant I had to brew less decks myself. And
yeah.
Spencer, you gave me the Temur ramp deck, which was everyone loved it. You know,
Yes, I played it today. I finally built it. I have a question about that. So, you're talking about the Patreon group for those who don't know, by the way. So if you're a patron of $10 or more, or $12 or more, yeah,
$12 a month basically is what it is. Yeah,
you got to submit decks to see Seth stream, and we actually had one of our listeners who was really happy about that. Seth, like they messaged me, they were so excited, and it's like it was so cool of you to do that for them, and I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I was happy when a couple people responded, because then I was like, because I made I think 9 decks, right? In order to make a deck before a set comes out is really challenging. Like imagine John just having to like brew 9 decks with Ravnica Allegiance, right?
My decks would be so bad.
Like before there's any available on the internet. It's just like it's a real challenge. I'm not gonna lie. So that's what I was doing. I've never really been presented with that before, and it was just like, all right, get to deck building, Seth. Like, do this. Don't just copy stuff off the internet. You are building these decks. People are going to be watching you talk about these decks. You don't want to look like a fool. And that's kind of what was going through my head. And it ended up working out. So that was.
I watched you play. Was it the Mardu list? Was that the one that someone submitted on the Facebook group?
Yeah, the Mardu tokens list, that was a hit. And then I
watched you play that for a bit. That was fun.
Yeah, and then I brewed a Mardu Angels list and some other. I mean, if you want to check, check me out if you want to know more about the individual decks for sure.
Yeah, and thank you so much to our patrons for making that easier on you. Like that's awesome of them. So I'm glad. I also
think as a brewer though, it's also important to realize that you built 9 decks, probably 6 of those are going to be immediately discarded, and that's just part of the game. Like I don't know which 9 decks you built, but at least for me, like if I'm building decks, a lot of them are just terrible, right? And you just have to like play a few games and then you realize and then you move on,
Yep, absolutely. I mean, a lot of the new, like I want to try as many of the new cards that I can. And there's so many new cards that have potential, and like
there really is. Yeah.
It's actually an incredible set. It's like I've never really felt like there's so many cards that could be good. And probably some of them are going to end up being duds, but like there's so many of them that there's going to be a decent amount of good ones. So.
I don't remember if I posted it on the Discord or tweeted it, but I said this is like probably my favorite set of all time. And as far as like bottom level power, it might be like one of the strongest sets that's not broken. But like it doesn't feel broken. It just feels like there's lots of good cards.
I was like, so when they announced this PT or MC or whatever we're going to call it now. My expectation was that it was going to be modern because it fit in kind of the modern slot. And I had been playing a lot of modern because all the GPs were modern. So I was like, okay, that's good. Like I know I'm familiar with like 6 of these like 10 good decks, and I can, know which ones are good against what and figure out what I want to play. So I was looking forward to modern. And when they announced standard, I was like, they're throwing us into the curveball. I was kind of annoyed. But like if this Mythic Championships was not standard, I would be really disappointed at this point. I think standard's going to completely change. I'm really looking forward to it.
All right. What about you, John? What have you done this week to improve at Magic?
My always improving this week. So basically, I've been doing 2 things. So Seth was talking about the streamer event, and I had said previously that the one thing that Arena is definitely going to change is the amount of quality content we have access to. So I spent a fair portion of the day just like checking out people's streams and like watching different people, seeing what they're doing, and seeing, I want to sort of like identify people that I'm going to get a lot of value out of watching, not just entertainment. And, a lot of the people you would expect, but I mean, I was watching Javier Dominguez. I really liked his stream. Thought it was really useful. And yeah, this is going to be something going forward. And I think asking the top pros to play this much, like to do this much content, like it's going to be valuable. You're going to learn a lot just from watching. So yeah, that's what I was doing, trying to figure out like who I'm going to pay attention to and trying to get like a bit of a viewership schedule for myself. And the other thing I've been thinking about is breaking down my preparation in Magic into sort of these 2-month plans where, for the next 2 months. So basically I started at the beginning of January. I'm looking at up until the end of Cleveland, and I have, modern GP in Toronto that I'm going to go to. I have, because I missed gold by a point, I have an RPTQ to prepare for. And also the new limited format. So I'm trying to like figure out what I need to do in each format and, make sure like I allocate the right amount of time at the right points to make sure I cover all bases. So that's planning and coverage. Those are the two things I've been working on.
Awesome. Is that something that you think that you'd be willing to share with the patrons, the 2-month plans as you do them?
The 2-month plan, it's more like I can share it. It's not like a rigid schedule of like, it's more like, but yeah, I can post some thoughts basically. I don't know how, like, I don't think anyone would want to copy my plan because it's very tailored to, I'm going to be traveling at this time. But yeah, sure. I can basically, it's more like a broad idea of like, I'm going to allocate this week to Modern.
Oh, cool. Cool.
Stuff like that. But yeah, I don't have it written out yet, but I can post something, sure.
So I'm curious, like, do you think it's a disadvantage, or how much of a disadvantage do you feel like for me? Because I'm just going to be streaming leading up to the Mythic Championships, right? Which is the next big event. And I'm just planning on being a relatively open book, right? Like if I want to test something, I'll probably be streaming the deck I'm testing. So like it's a weird dynamic. Do you feel like that's going to put me at a major disadvantage, like going into the tournament, just kind of like giving away certain pieces of information?
My personal opinion of this, and I've thought about this a lot because I've been on teams with, so I don't think it's going to hurt you too much. What I think the bigger problem is that people who are testing with you, who are not MPL, who are like giving you their ideas, you need to make sure they're okay with what you're doing, because they're the ones who are gaining nothing but losing some percentage, right? Like you're gaining something and losing some percentage. So it's like more, you can sort of control, oh, well, I want to keep that secret, or that was an issue for me when people were writing articles about stuff that we were talking about in testing or planning to stream. And I'm like, well, I don't want to share information. This is me personally. I don't want to share information with someone who's then going to broadcast it. So you need to, I mean, that's my opinion. You should make sure your team is okay with, exactly what your boundaries are. But I don't think that, I don't think it's going to hurt you too much unless it's like a deck that's like completely off the radar, which is possible. Some teams have showed up with that, or like a very unusual cyber plan that you want to keep under wraps. But I think trying something out in the early stages, there's going to be so much content that like it's kind of going to be lost in ether. Like if you play a few games with the deck, like you play a few games with Mardu tokens, and then the next day you're playing, Team or Ramp, I don't think that the world is going to focus on the fact that you went 3-0 with Mardu tokens and thought it was good if you're not still working on it. So basically, I think people will mostly ignore what's being broadcast. But yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think that one of the things that I've noticed is if you guys break it, you're probably not going to say anything, right? It's just not broken that often. And I think that like the things that you get advantage are things that John talked about.
Well, I already broke it, but keep going. I broke it last night. Just watch my stream, but keep going.
Is it Mardu Angels? I'm guessing it's not Mardu Angels.
If you broke it, you broke it. Like you do you, man.
No one knows which deck. It's so my own secret.
One of the 9.
It's funny. The number of times that the Team CCMTG or Team Oasis games had this like 60 of the 75 for Channel Fireball or for East West Bowl, stuff like that. Like we did it all the time. And so for me, like Magic players have just gotten so good that I think you're not at as big of a disadvantage as you think you are.
Well, I don't think he thinks he's that much.
If I'm at it, like I'm probably at some small, like for me personally, I think I'm probably at some small percentage of a disadvantage, but I don't really care. Like it's just like,
I think this is what we're heading to, though. This is like everyone is going to be sharing that same disadvantage. Everyone's going to be streaming.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be people who are like, it's a resource war. I'm going to keep everything to myself. That's still going to happen, but I don't know.
Cool. Well, let's move on to our main topic this week. This week we're talking about top 5s. We have different top 5s. So mine is top 5 Gruul cards. John's is top 5 pre-order cards. And Seth is top 5 cards.
Just cards.
So who had 6? Was I the 6?
You had 6. I had 5. Seth had 7.
I had an honorable mention. Yeah, okay.
I actually didn't include some because I thought that you guys would include them. So I was like, I'm not going to put this on this. Somebody else is going to have this.
And then we all thought it was crap and no one.
No, Seth has it.
Okay.
Oh, do I? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, probably in your team or rap deck, right?
No. So we'll talk about it when we get there. But let's start with John. So John, you had your top 5 pre-orders for this. So before we get into these, and we'll go 5 to 1. But how, like, what is the thing that you look for when you want to pre-order a card?
Okay, well, so when you presented the topic of like our top 5, I think you suggested just top 5 cards, and I was like, that's really difficult because that's not how I explore the spoiler. Early on when the set comes out, my main focus is limited because that's the kind of thing where the work I do early isn't invalidated by the first tournament result. It's just a progress. Like I can work on limited. It's a steady increase in my understanding of the format. I'll start drafting it. Whereas constructed, trying to evaluate and rank cards, to me, I'm mostly just reading the spoiler to identify like what cards are going to be staples of the new format. I want to be familiar with the cards. So like when I have a deck idea, I'm like, oh, that would go in there. That works with that. But I also, and I'm not like, I don't speculate on cards, but I do try to pre-order cards that I think maybe undervalued that I'm probably going to play with. And I'm wrong a lot and I don't really care because I don't buy a lot of booster packs. So like pre-ordering cards is fine. So yeah, the cards I'm trying to look out for when I look through the spoiler are not really the flashiest mythics. Like I think the most expensive card is the demon, right now, the 4/4 demon. Spawn of Mayhem.
I have no idea what the expensive cards in this set are.
Okay, yeah, I think Spawn of Mayhem, and I think that's a good card, and I'm just like not interested in pre-ordering it. It might be really expensive, it might not, but
do you think? Sorry, going back to what you're saying, is that part of the price tag? Like, if it was $5, would you pre-order it, or is it just because of the power level?
If Spawn of Mayhem was $5, I would pre-order it. It's not, but like I said, it's not a spec. It's just like I don't order 10 of a card. I order 4. I'm like, I want a playset of this card, and I think Spawn of Mayhem is probably going to be worth more than $5, and I want to play with it. So I look generally like the flashy planeswalkers are things I stay away from just because they're rarely undervalued. It's sometimes wrong. I mean, I did pre-order Jace Vryn's Prodigy when it was $15, and that was skyrocketed. But I'm looking for, cheap rares that I think are going to be played, or like a mythic that's undervalued.
And I think that's good for our listeners. I think that's the thing that they can relate to. Like, they're trying to build their collection. They want to know what to buy. This is great for them.
Okay.
I normally don't say don't buy a card, but when I was testing yesterday, Kaya did not meet expectations. So like, I don't know, but that's what I would probably steer away from.
Yeah, I thought Kaya looked pretty bad in my first look, so I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah.
I was interested to see how Dovin played out, because that's a card I was like, I think this card actually could see play, but I'm not sure. And I didn't really get any confirmation on that. It seemed okay, but not great when I saw people playing with it. BBD had it in a deck. Anyway, should we go through the list, or do you want to?
Yeah, let's start with number 5. We have Judith, the Scourge Diva. She's a diva. That's my favorite part about her. She's 1 black-red for a legendary creature human shaman, and then other creatures you control get +1/+0. Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, Judith, the Scourge Diva, deals 1 damage to any target. So before we get into this, I should mention your honorable mention, which was Absorb. So that's a blue-white for a counter spell, and then you gain 3 life. So before we get into Judith, why is Absorb your honorable mention?
Okay, well, I mean, I'll just mention, when I did this list on Monday, I just pulled the TCG price for each card just so I could, because like Seth was asking, I do look at the price. I'm not just going to pre-order a card no matter what. And the price on Absorb for the new one was like $2 on TCG. I have my playset of Absorb. I'm not going to pre-order them. I have them from Invasion. It was a good card then. I expect this to be a very good card in Standard. So yeah, but I mean, it already exists. There are already copies of it. So like, that's why it's an honorable mention. Like, I don't think it's an exciting pre-order. It's just, if you don't have Absorbs and you think you're going to play Control, pick these up while they're cheap. They might not go up too much, but they're a good buy is what I would say.
Sure. At $2, that makes a lot of sense.
And before he talks about Judith, I also had Judith, right? I just want to confirm that.
In your list?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, keep going.
Okay, so Judith. So we talked about Judith in our last podcast, and what I said about it then was, I don't know if this card's good because I don't know if there's support for it. Because I wasn't thinking about decks at that time. I was just reading a card and having my initial reaction to it. Since we did that podcast, I looked at a little bit at things, and I've seen like there's Skirk Prospector, there's like Siege Gang Commander. Like that was the deck back in whenever Siege Gang was originally printed. And Judith it looks really good in that shell. And I think there's probably going to be support for Judith. It was priced at $2 on TCG. And for that price, I would pick up a playset. Yeah. I don't know if it's gone. It might have gone up since then because I saw people.
Probably.
Yeah, probably is still. Yeah, probably got up.
I could pull it. I just checked, but yeah.
So while he's pulling up the price, Seth, it's also on your list. What is it about Judith that impresses you that you're excited about this card?
Yeah, I mean it's really, really good. Like it is
Okay. It's $8.
It's $8. Yes,
yeah,
that
it's
makes
literally 4 times better than it was on Monday.
I was about to say there is no way that it is $2. Like it was definitely. It might be the like. If I wanted to buy a rare in the set, that might be the card. Like, like not talking about mythics, but like if I wanted to, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the most expensive rare right now, just because like it goes in Rakdos, it goes in Mardu, it goes in, a lot of the like any black-red deck, and it's super synergistic with all of those decks. It's multicolored, which has other implications. So it was a standout card for me, and I think it's a good card to have on the list. And you probably could it. You were smart enough to follow your own list, John. I hope you have those. I hope you spent $8 to get your playset of Judith already, because
I actually pre-ordered my top 4. I did not pre-order Judith because it was later that I came to that conclusion. My original list had what did I have as my number 5 originally?
Gruul Spellbreaker.
Spellbreaker and Deputy of Detention were like kind of equal, but. Okay, I should have got mine at $2 now. I'm in the boat with the rest of everyone else. But yeah, my number 4. You want to read out the card?
Yeah, absolutely. I can read it. It is Incubation Druid. It's a 1 and a green. Oh, that's mine.
Not mine.
That's mine. Sorry. Spoiler!
I do think that card's good, though.
It's Bedevil. It's black, red for an instant. You can destroy target artifact, creature, or planeswalker.
All right, so at the time that I made my list on Monday, Bedevil was at $6, which is kind of high. It's still around there. So my feeling on Bedevil is this card is very obviously playable, I would say. I feel it's going to be played, and it will probably be played in high number in the decks that want it. I don't think $6 is a steal. It's just probably a fair price. Maybe it'll go up. If it's in like one of the best decks, which is certainly possible, I could see it at $10. But the point is simply, I want to buy this card because I want to play with it. There's no reason for me to wait. So that was my thinking on Bedevil.
So on that one, I feel like buying it to play with it is good, but it's just super hard for a regular rare to go much beyond $6. I feel like in a set like this. So like if you're buying it for value, that's like
I'm not doing that.
Yeah. But I agree with you. It's just a really solid removal spell.
Yeah. So like I said, this is a pre-order for the reason I pre-order cards is to have them. For the first few tournaments, I want to play them more so than it is to speculate and make money. I want to sort of avoid losing money by like waiting. So I don't think this card is going to go down in price very soon. So I'll just buy them.
So for what it's worth, when Theros came out, Hero's Downfall was $5.
I also pre-ordered that.
And it topped out at a little bit above $15.
Yeah. It's a 1-color card, though. Can go in any deck, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the comparisons to Hero's Downfall are really interesting. I have heard, I think it was Reed Duke said he thought that this card was better suited to replace something like Dreadbore or maybe even Maelstrom Pulse or stuff like that in Modern. So if that's the case, if it's seeing 1 of 2 of play in Modern, in addition to being a 4 of in a Tier 1 standard deck, I could see it breaking $10 pretty easy.
Yeah, it has potential, but
Rakdos has to be the number 1 deck. Like black
yeah,
red based
yeah.
has to be the number one deck if it breaks $10.
Yeah, and that was the case with Heroes Downfall. When it was a 2-of, it was $5, right? And it wasn't until Mono Black Devotion that it was able to make that huge jump. And Esper Control, I think, had played some of them too for a little while. So, but yeah, let's move on to your next card. We have this was like one of my favorite cards in the set, by like a substantial margin for what it's worth, John. We have Biogenic Ooze. It's 3 green for a creature ooze. When it enters the battlefield, it makes a 2/2 token. That's an ooze. And at the beginning of your end step, you put a 1/1 counter on each ooze you control. And then, for 1 green, you create a 2/2 green ooze token. So, I actually texted Seth about this card before he streamed. I said, hey, if you're looking for another new card to play in this ramp deck, I think that this would be a pretty good one to try out. I also have heard people talk about this, like with Mystic, Snake, Elf thing, whatever that card's called. Like, this card's getting a lot of buzz, John.
Yeah, so this is the only Mythic on my pre-order list. It was at 7-something on TCG. It's even dropped. It's like 5 now. This card, so okay, what I really like, do you want to read out what the card does, just so people who aren't familiar know?
Didn't I just read it?
Did you? Okay, I was looking at the price. So basically, what I like about this card is it gives you value immediately. So like if they have removal spell, you're still getting another creature. It will single-handedly force a control deck to Wrath, and it's a great follow-up if they tap out to deal with your board. So it's also really good against other creature decks because you're gumming up the ground a lot. It's basically good in every deck, in every situation. I would be very surprised if this is not a played card. And yeah, it also fits really into the kind of thing I like to do. So, I mean, I think there's a good chance I'll play with it. And so I think I'm buying this card both because I think the potential for a price spike is certainly there. This is a Mythic that could hit 20 if it's played in one of the better decks. And it's also a card I'll probably want to play with at some point. So yeah, I'll get my playset now.
I've been trying to think of what this card reminds me of, Seth, between like, at first I was like, is it like Precursor Golem? No, not really. Is it like Thragtusk? No, not really. Is it like Huntmaster of the Fells? Maybe a little bit, not like too much. You kind of get the engine going, kind of like Huntmaster of the Fells. Is there anything that it reminds you of, or what do you think of when you see the card?
I think of a card that's just like, normally it wasn't in my top 5 because normally I feel like I overvalue just the big giant monsters. Although this one is just like it's just really high power level. And then we have this. We also have ways that synergize with it in Simic, and we have cards like Wilderness Reclamation, which is, spoiler alert, on my top 5. But like, if you have a bunch of mana and you can start making oozes, they just get absurd. Like they go crazy. And so like, and that's not even necessary. Like you don't necessarily need to be activating it a bunch, but if you can, it's just like, it spirals.
I like the idea of like a card. So when I'm spending 5 mana on a card, I want something. Okay, you know what it reminds me a little bit of, and it's not because the card does something similar, but it reminds me a little bit of the Scarab God, because if you don't have an answer for it, like the game's going to be out of hand, and then you're just going to lose the game. Like you need to have an answer, and even when you do, it can still sometimes be good. So
that's a fair comparison.
Yeah, I mean, in Scarab God, like I was a little slow on picking up on how good that card was, but I think Biogenic Ooze is like, it's going to be a scary card to play against. If they play that and you don't have an answer, like you better find them very soon.
All right, number 2 on your list, we have Gutter Bones. It's black for a creature, skeleton, warrior. It enters the battlefield tapped, and you can play 1 in a black to return it from your graveyard to your hand. Different than a lot of the cards that you're used to. Usually these come to the battlefield, and you can only activate this ability if your opponent lost life this turn. Talk to me about this one.
Okay, so this card is, first of all, it's an efficient creature. It's a 2/1 for 1 mana that will come back in some percentage of your games, come back from the graveyard. So it's a recursive threat. I think it reminds me of like Gravecrawler, that kind of synergy with like, there's cards that synergize with it. The Priest that sack 2 creatures to make them sack a creature. Do you know which one I'm talking about? I don't remember the name. But I think
I don't remember the name either, but yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a 1/2 that you sack 2 creatures, drain your opponent for 2, and they sack the dude. But yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like this is going to be a really important card in any black aggressive deck. It's like a for sure 4 of in almost any aggressive deck I could think of. And we're talking about Judith, and we're talking about cards like that. This card is going to be a staple of the aggro decks, in my opinion. And if I can pick up a playset for $1.50 each, like I'm just buying them right now. I assume I'll play with these at some point.
Cool.
A solid card that like enables engines. Like I think you could play it even if it didn't, but the fact that it works with all the other cards that they're printing, I think it's gonna be a really good one.
Yeah, I think that the fact that it goes into your hand instead of into play tells me that this card was a huge part and tested quite a bit in like the new standard league that they have, that Michael Hinderocker's working on. Like this card seems tested to me, and I think that's really important. So I think this next card is another one that I don't remember if it's on my list now, but I think that I didn't put it on my list because I thought you guys would have it on, and that is
Squadron Hawk.
Yeah, it's a little different. It's better.
It's a 4/4 Squadron Hawk.
It's green, so it's better. Yeah, we have Growth Chamber Guardian. It's 1 green for 1 and a green for a creature elf crab warrior. So it's already better than Squadron Hawk because it's an elf crab warrior, Seth. You can pay 2 and a green to adapt 2. So if this creature has no 1/1 counters on it, you put 2 1/1 counters on it, and then whenever 1 or more 1/1 counters are put on Growth Chamber Guardian, you may search your library for a card named Growth Chamber Guardian, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So I have one question before we get into why this is on your pre-order list. Is this good enough to replace the Explore package in something like Green Black?
Well, so the Explore pack, you mean like specifically Wild Growth Walker?
Yeah, sure.
So I think the answer is depends on the metagame, because Wild Growth Walker is really good against aggro decks.
Right.
And this card is still good against aggro decks, but not the same game-ending situation that a Wild Growth Walker can be. But this card is much better against mid-range and control.
Yeah.
I don't think it's good against aggro decks. I don't think that card is that good.
I'm a little worried. I'm a little worried about it against aggro decks, but
it depends on what the aggro decks do. Like if the aggro decks are going wide with tokens, it might not be good. But I think like having a 4/4 against creature decks that are like trying to get through with 2/1s, like it could be really good.
It's probably really good against mono. It's probably good against mono white, but
I mean the issue is the fact that you're getting more of them into your hand and you're getting the card advantage isn't super relevant against aggro, because you're like if you play 2/2 and then you activate it, like you've spent your turn 2 and turn 3 have been spent on making a 4/4 creature. That's been your interaction with whatever your opponent is doing, and so then you just have this 4/4, and then all of a sudden maybe they play a removal spell, a tribunal, a lava coil, whatever, and then you're probably just dead already. That's how I see it. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think the play pattern against like the aggro decks are you got to play this and try to trade it off, and then play your other spells. I agree, it's worse there. I think it's still fine, but certainly not a Wild Growth Walker.
I do think it synergizes with another card that I want to talk about, but Rhythm of the Wild, because any type of +1/+1 synergy where you're able to you don't have to even activate it to be able to search for more of them. That's kind of like the big gain.
Did you think about this with Hadana's Climb or Rhythm of the Wild, John?
The card that I mainly thought about with this card, well, first of all, I think this card stands alone as a very good card, but the card I specifically looked at was, let me get the name, Biomancer's Familiar, which is it costs blue and green. I think it's a 2/2 that reduces your activated abilities by 2. So you can sort of chain a bunch of these in a turn. You can also tap it to allow it to adapt again. And that to me, that card looks to me a lot like Winding Constrictor in terms of like, if there's enough support for it, it can be insane. So that's the card I was looking at. I don't know if that's going to be a deck or not, but I think either way, like Growth Chamber Guardian, what I really like about it, it's a 2-drop that does not lose relevancy when you draw it later. So normally when you're playing a control deck, I think you want to kind of ignore their 2-drop if you can, and like force them to overextend into a Wrath, or keep mana up for counter spells or whatever. Like you don't want to have to spend your turn 2 or 3 dealing with a 2/2, but this card forces you to, because if you don't deal with it, they can start getting card advantage. They don't have to deploy more threats into a Wrath. Like it's just, I feel like if you just look at the 2 cards, Growth Chamber Guardian, Biogenic Ooze, your anti-control plan is like very solid. You play a 2-drop, you force them to kill it, and then you play like 2 oozes that you force them to Wrath, and then they're tapped out and you resolve a Vivian Reed or something. Like this is just like, that's a deck. And yeah. I think in other decks, like the Rhythm of the Wild you're talking about, it can go in that deck very well. It can work with Biomancer's Familiar very well. Like this is just a really good card that I expect to see a lot of play.
I agree with you. I think it's a solid card, and it's going to see a decent amount of play. I'm wondering if it, like to your question, Spencer, I'm not sure personally if it's good enough to be played just straight up in Golgari, because there's not really other synergies like a Rhythm, like a Climb, like a Biomancer's Familiar. But it could also just be a sideboard card, because I see it as better against control as a 2-drop that they have to answer, and it can't be seal awayed. It can't. So like you can just play it, you activate it, and then it's just like, that just seems like kind of a nightmare. So
that was one of my thoughts. Is like, so for example, I played a lot of green-white mid-range decks in the last set, not tokens decks, and one of the things that was missing is like a Downtos Vanguard is like really good, but like this fits into that slot way better. It's better against aggro. It's still really good against control decks, and thinking about how we were playing with a really small standard, right? And like decks get upgrades too. Just because a new set comes in doesn't mean decks are just invalidated. We should still be trying to like see where cards fit too. And this card is like first of all, it's way better than Thorn Lieutenant in my opinion, as far as like a good green 2-drop. And like there are tons of decks that are playing that card. So kind of thinking about where does this card fit outside of its broken synergies, because I agree with John. I think this card just stands on its own. I think it is. Like, think about it in the turns where it's not a 2-drop, right? Where you just play it, you activate it, you go draw a card, and you say go. And it's like, well, there's a 4/4 and I drew a card. Like,
well, you did spend 5 mana for that, though, but yeah.
But I get it, but it's like it's an engine, though, right? Like,
yeah. Well, I think Thorn Lieutenant is all like, I think Thorn Lieutenant's a better card against aggro, specifically to Seth's point.
That's true.
But like, there was a lot of decks. Like, I played Thorn Lieutenant, or I tried it in the mono green Stompy deck when it was popular with Galta, and a lot of decks just ignore that. Like the red-black deck just lets you have a 2/3 for 5 turns and then eventually kills it. And yeah, this card is like, they can't just ignore this, very, like a mid-range control, they can't really just ignore this, or they'll pay a price.
So let's move on to my top 5, unless we have anything else to say about this card.
That's good.
So I did Gruul, and I wasn't gonna do Gruul. I was gonna just do a regular top 5 like Seth, and then all my cards were Simic or Gruul, and I had like very few Simic cards on. I was like, whatever, we'll just do Gruul. And here's the thing, I am just acknowledging my biases tonight. My favorite guilds are Simic and Gruul. It's not even a little bit close, and like they're both in this set, and I'm so excited. So making my top 5, I just thought I should highlight my true self here, guys, and just talk about. And it sounds like Seth. It sounds like you're in a similar vein. You just love the Gruul stuff, and. I think that Gruul is underappreciated. I think people just think they're big dumb monsters, and I think that we should appreciate Gruul for all that it is. So I specifically left off a few things before we get to it. Rhythm of the Wild is not on my list. I knew it would be on somebody else's because I think the card is great. And then same thing with Growth Chamber Guardian. I did not put them on my list. So let's start with my number 5. I have Gruul Spellbreaker. I think. So this card is 1 a green and a red for a creature ogre warrior. It has Riot, so when it enters the battlefield, you get to pick the counter or haste. And then as long as it's your turn, it has hexproof. It and you have hexproof. So I think this card is really good. I also think this card is a little overhyped. So I think this card is solid, right? Like 3 mana 4/4 is totally fine. It's really, really good against Settle the Wreckage and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's like kind of just a 3-drop. It's really good because we have Llanowar Elves. So one of the things that I really like about this card is that in my Llanowar Elves Rhythm of the Wild deck, it makes my Llanowar Elves better because I have a higher density of 3-drops that I'm really, really happy about. And that's really important to me. I think this card is good, and it's definitely one that even if you're playing something like maybe you're like me and you want to try dinosaurs, I think this is a great sideboard card for even something like dinosaurs, where you can play this and attack into a Settle the Wreckage, stuff like that. So it kind of just depends on like what you're doing with Gruul, but this one's a little overhyped, but I think still pretty good.
Yeah, I this, like I said, this was really close to my list. I think it's a really good card. The downsides of it are, for one, it's only going in a mid-range creature red-green deck, so it's a little bit narrow. I think it'll be very good in that deck. It's competing a little bit with Steel Leaf Champion. That's still in the standard, right?
It is, yep.
Okay. It's obviously it's really good with Llanowar Elf, but so is Steel Leaf Champion, and I don't know, depends on what else you're playing red for. There's a lot of good green cards. Like I like the Ooze, I like the Growth Chamber. So I could see this card being very good as 4 of in a deck. I could also see it not being worth branching out for. So that's where I was, but I do think it's a quality card, and I hope I get to play with it.
Seth, any thoughts on this one?
So yeah, I like it. I had 4 of it in my Gruul deck. I was trying it out in a Jund deck. It's just a good creature. I mean, 3 mana, 4/4. The fact that I was using, I think it's called Thrash.
Yeah.
The Thrash split card. Thrash Threaten, Thrash something. But it a type of fight effect. If you have Hexproof on your turn, it also protects you from Settle the Wreckage, right? I don't know if we said
it does,
that.
Yeah.
It gives you Hexproof. So that is kind of a big deal as well. And so it's not just a 3 mana 4/4. If we look back, when's the last time that we had a 3 mana 4/4? I don't even remember.
Loxodon Smiter.
But exactly. But how many years ago is Loxodon
That was the
Smiter
last
printed?
time.
I remember. We have Steel Leaf Champion now, but that's not a.
Yeah, but that's a
larger
green.
and triple green.
Exactly. So it should. It's clearly a good card. Yeah.
I think so too. One thing that I will say about it as well is that I actually didn't think of that Thrash thing, which is funny because Thrash is on my list. So
it is on your list? Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
So
I hope you have the name if it's on your list, I can pull it up for you.
I only have the first name.
They're both there. So next I have Incubation Druid. This card is 1 and a green for a creature elf druid. You can tap it to add a mana of any type that a land that you have could produce, and then you can, if it has a 1/1 counter on it, then you can have 3 mana instead. And then for 3 GG, you can adapt 3. If this creature has no +1/+1 counters, do so. Put them on there. Put 3 on there. So, a deck that I built that qualified my friend for a Pro Tour was kind of a season later, but it was Ulamog ramp deck with Worldbreaker. That it was like a Eldrazi ramp deck, and it was funny because when he qualified for the Pro Tour with it, we didn't have Wolf, the vampire that flips. And then after that PTQ online, we put it in there, and then I went and won like a 2K with it, with the same deck. And that, the ability for your ramp creature to become a threat, a real threat, is already good enough for ramp decks. Also, this card is so good with Hadana's Climb and with Rhythm of the this card has so many synergies. It's kind of crazy. John talked about the 2/2 that makes this cheaper. That actually makes you activate this card for free, basically, because you can then, just tap it for the 3 mana that you use. But this card, I think, is flying under the radar for Incubation Druid. And I think it's because of the toughness. Because the fact that it dies to shock is a pretty big deal. That's kind of scary. And Shivan Fire and stuff like that, especially in an aggressive format where maybe more decks are going to be playing something like Shivan Fire. That could be a problem for this. But it's still so powerful. Like it's a really powerful one in my opinion. Seth, why don't we go to you first?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's a really good card. Should be played in any type of Simic. Like if you're Simic deck, I mean, it works really well there. In our Team of Ramp deck, it was there. I mean, there's other good green 2-drops that we've already talked about. That it's going to be competing with. Like maybe now we're not playing Armorfolk Branchwalkers anymore, or whatever, because maybe this is just an upgrade in some decks. So
I think I'm playing this over Druid of the Cow like all the time, right?
Definitely over Druid of the Cow. So it's already there, I think. And the fact that if you have
it's not like Druid of the Cow had some, like it's not a strict upgrade, right? Because like the 1/3 body is useful.
I don't think it's a strict. No, it's not a strict
upgrade.
But the fact that you can make it a 3/5 and then like that's really nice against certain matchups where just the 5-tone does like can brick off a lot of attacks, and the fact that it can produce multiple colors of mana. Like in Golgari, if I was playing a 2-drop now, I think I would play this card because sometimes you have situations where you only have one black source in play, and you already have 4 Llanowar that produce green. This can allow you to cast your Chupacabras or your Contempts or something like that.
It does also, I will say that I'm not sure the cards go well together, but one of the problems with the Steel Leaf Champion was that it really put a tight grip on your mana. It was hard to splash effectively for people splash for Scrap Heap Scrounger. That's fine, but this means you maybe can still play Steel Leaf and have a splash color. It helps you with the mana a little bit. I don't know if you want both in the same deck, but you know.
Yeah, I think that it will be telling to see how many specifically deal 2 damage effects are in the format that will dictate a lot of how good this card is, in my opinion. So let's go on to my number 3 card, which is Skargan Hellkite. This card is 3 red for a creature dragon. It has Riot. It's a 4/4 with flying, and then for 3 and a red, it deals 2 damage divided as you choose among 1 or 2 targets. Activate this ability only if it has a 1/1 counter on it. Okay, so I have so many thoughts about this card. And the one I'd like to start with is, why is it that every time a card like this is printed, people are like, not as good as Thundermaw Hellkite? It's like, okay, thank you for letting us know that, everybody. Go ahead, John.
No, I mean, I have issues with this card, but it's not about the comparison to Thundermaw. This is a big flyer in a format with a lot of ways that, like, the format was already about big flyers, right? With Crackling Drake and Enigma Drake and Doom Whisperer. And so Doom Whisperer kind of faded out of favor because there are just so many ways to deal with it. Like people are playing, like Vivian Reed, Ravenous Chupacabra, and this is just a card that dies to those things.
So I actually have two thoughts on what you just said. The first one is, my biggest concern with this card is I'm a little worried that we're going to see more Rekindling Phoenix. And if we do, I worry about part of this card in the fact that it's tough, right? Because if you want the 5/5 to give it its ability in certain matchups versus when you want to give it haste, one of the things that I like about it is that it actually comes down and immediately smacks a Vivian Reed in the face against decks like Golgari. And I'm pretty happy with that because it's definitely going to put it out of range of minusing onto it.
Well, that's if they like play their Vivian Reed into an empty board. Are they going to be forced to do that?
Not an empty board, right? Like how often does a Vivian just tick up with things to protect it, right? That are on the ground in that deck.
I think generally against decks with dragons, they didn't want to do that, but it also survives a Hellkite attack, so like you get 2 activations at least.
That's true.
Yeah, I think. Well, okay. So the question isn't really, is Vivian Reed a good card against a dragon? It probably is.
It is, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the card is just okay to me. Like I think Phoenix is a much better card than this. I think Doom Whisperer is a better card than this.
So Phoenix is actually one of my concerns with this card, is that I think that if I'm looking for a red flyer for red, would I just rather have Phoenix? And often for me, the answer is yes. one thing that I do think about though is that Phoenix is going to rotate, and this card's going to still be here. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a card that reminds me of Storm Wrath and Thundermaw Hellkite, and it's a similar type of card. But the question is, like, are there better options out there?
Yeah. Did you how many you had some of these in your Gruul deck? How were they?
They were solid. I mean, I had 2 copies in Gruul, and it felt like if I wanted a 5-drop for Gruul, there wasn't a better 5-drop than that. If I wanted to 5-mana creature in that deck.
Sure. Interesting note. I haven't seen a lot of Sarkhan Unsealings decks yet, but having this.
That is a card that I thought about when I saw this card. It's like, if that I've wanted. Wait, Sarkhan. What did you? It's the 3-mana planeswalker, right?
The enchantment.
So the enchantment. Also,
okay.
I did think about Grixis Dragons with Sarkhan and this card as well.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a dragon. There are dragon synergies in the format, so that is.
Yeah.
Sarkhan's Unsealing is the enchantment that cares about.
Okay. Yeah. I know that now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Planeswalker. John was talking about Sarkhan, the Planeswalker, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's a card that pushes me towards this a little more, because like I think that is a card that has a lot of potential in a narrow application, but you need like a decent number of dragons, and they didn't really have enough good ones to make it a viable strategy. Nicol Bolas is still a card. Dude, people will start playing that again.
Yeah, Nicol Bolas is like one of my favorite cards ever. So like I hope that I get to jam some of that. So
yeah, I mean it only costs 5 to flip if you have a Biomancer's Familiar. But I guess it stacks if you have 3 Biomancer's Familiars, it costs 1. Flip Nicol Bolas for 1.
Well, you still need the colored mana.
Okay, so yeah, 3 mana.
So let's move on to my next card. The next card that I have is the Ooze, and we already talked about it a little bit, so we won't talk about it too much. But the Ooze is good. I think that people are underrating this card, so I won't add too much to it. But I will say that it's not hard to like imagine the game kind of like Scarab God, where you activate it, you untap, you activate it again. Then on your end step, like your board is just huge. Like it's so hard to recover from that if you don't have a sweeper that deals with the whole thing. And I think people don't see that yet.
It provides like a continual value without having to play more cards from your hand.
Yeah.
Like all you have to do if you have this card and they can't deal with it is sink as much mana into it every turn as you can, and like they're gonna die or find a way, and then you just start playing your other threats.
Yeah.
So, really good.
So for those who know, we're doing the podcast live now, and one of the things said in chat was that this card reminded them of Pack Rat, which is interesting. So let's go on to my number 1 card. It is Thrash Threat. I am so excited about this card. So Thrash is red-green hybrid for instant. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. And then Threat is 2 RB, 2 red-green, that's wrong, for a sorcery to create a 4/4 beast token with trample. Guys, I am stoked. This card speaks to me. This is the best, like one of the best mid-range green-red cards I've seen in so long. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to be so sad. Because this card is the sweetness. I get to kill their stupid planeswalker or their dumb blocker and just attack them. And then in matchups where like they don't have any creatures, I just get to play a 4/4, which I wanted to do anyway. Like, this is so sweet to me. Talk me down. Talk me down.
No, I can't talk you down. I think this card's excellent. I think that there's a little bit of I think the Thrash side is just way better card than Threat.
Yeah, that's on purpose. They said that these rare split cards are built for best of one. So the one side is really, really good, and then the other side is like okay, if it's not good, at least you have something to do.
Yeah, but the fact that it can hit planeswalkers, I feel like this card will usually have something to do. Yeah, it's just an efficient removal spell, instant speed. I love it. I think it'll be played as a 4/0.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought of when I saw this card is like in building some of my Gruul decks, I was like, man, like Lava Coil's sweet and stuff like that, but I wish that I had something more versatile in my 2-mana removal slot that I could use. Like, I literally thought that when I was building dinosaurs and I was looking at things to do, and then some of the Gruul cards got spoiled, and I was building monster stacks, I was like, man, this is like kind of missing something in the spell slot. Like, the spells are a little bit lackluster. And then this was spoiled. I was like, this is exactly what I wanted. Seth, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's a really good card. I kind of agree with what you all have said, and yeah.
So it's funny. A lot of people compared this to, they're like, oh, it's just a bad Gruul Rampager, and
What?
the you'd like.
First of all, that card was very good, right?
Yes,
but I don't even think it's worse.
I don't even think it's the same card. It's like,
there's a different card in the format. I don't think that's a direct comparison. There's a different card. There's a different Gruul split card that is much more similar to Gruul Rampager, and I can pull
plus
that
4/+2 and the
yes. And so if someone's making the comment that they probably are just mistaking the card, would be my guess.
No, they talked about it because of the 4/4 specifically. They were saying that that like that in those decks you would rather have, discarding the Rampager and dealing 4, and it's like, well, I think that this just fits in a different style of green-red deck. This is like a big creature deck that wants to, it removes the blocker either way, if that's what you want to do, but it also provides a threat. I'm pretty, and it's even called threat.
It's a removal spell, right?
Right, it's what it is first.
Like Gore Clan Rampager is not a removal spell. So like it takes out a blocker, but
so the card, I don't really understand that comparison, because there's plenty of 4-mana 4/4 tramples, that have been printed, like those similar types of cards. Like if I see, like Collision Colossus is the card that I was kind of thinking, all right, if you're like trying to refer to a Gruul Rampager type card, because that actually pumps another creature, it gives +4/+2 and trample, which is similar to the Rampager, but sure. I don't understand that.
Yeah, probably add this to my pre-order list. I don't even think I knew it was a rare.
Oh yeah,
but it's like $1. Yeah,
dude,
so
it's $1. Oh, this card's so sweet. I'm so excited for this one. Oh man, I'm like ready to get on Arena right now, guys. So that's my top 5. These are 5 cards that I'm excited about. It's funny, because I was thinking Gruul, I wasn't even thinking of Sarkhan with the dragon, but I'm probably gonna brew that up too. So it's really fun. This set is so cool, guys. Let's go on to Seth's cards. So Seth, yours aren't in any particular order, so I'm just gonna start from the top, and then we'll go from there. So we have Theater of Horrors. I knew I was gonna do that. I knew it. It's 1, a black and a red for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the part of your library. During your turn, if an opponent loses life this turn, you may play this exiled cards with Theater of Horrors. So this is important, because the number of people that I'm like, well, I don't know if they've lost. Like, how do I know they're gonna lose life? It's like, no, you can play any of the exiled cards once they've been dealt damage. So I'd like to kind of preface the conversation with that, Seth. So what is your why is this card on your list?
And you missed one part of text also. It's 4 mana.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You can also pay 4 mana to deal 1 to an opponent or a planeswalker.
Yeah, so anyways, the card does a lot. It's fine that I'm sure that most people don't know exactly what it does. I've already played with it, and it is actually very good. Like, I think when people saw it, they just wrote it off because they're like, too many lines of text. Like, it's an enchantment that just might not do anything. Let's get rid of that. Okay.
No, this will do something.
Yeah, this is like, I played it in my Rakdos deck. I wanted an effect. The clear comparison to me is with Experimental Frenzy, right? Because it's like a card a turn, like kind of in a similar type of effect. Being able to it's a card advantage engine essentially. And in those types of decks, if you're Rakdos, you're able to deal damage to the opponent. Like, you can activate this card, or you can maybe sacrifice the Fanatical Firebrand. There's other ways to do it, and then it isn't until end of turn. Like, when I first read it, I was like, all right, so you can play that card until end of turn, okay. Or maybe you might think that it's just you can cast a spell, so you can't play lands off of it. Both of those are wrong. You can play lands off of this, and you can still cast them later on. Like, if you play this on turn 3, and you exile a card on turn 4, you can cast that card on turn 7. You know,
and,
so that's
and it's interesting to note that you can play the land and cast the card.
yes. So I mean, there's a number of reasons why I liked it. Like I was playing a game yesterday, and I just like there were so many things going on with it. I just like my opponent was at like 2 life or something, and I just had this in play with 8 mana. I was just like doing my thing, and I was like, oh wait, I can just ping you twice and kill you. I just forgot about the ping part of it. You know, like it was. I was just like,
dude, I just did that on a podcast. Like I feel you.
Yeah. So it was. I liked it, and you can play it on turn 3 without any worries, and you can just jam it in there, and it's going to be a pain for any type of control deck. It could end up being, like, if you're Mardu, maybe it's more of a sideboard card. I don't know, because you might not be able to trigger it as much, but if you actually can turn it on reliably, it's, yeah.
I think, well, first of all, it's a mana cheaper than Experimental Frenzy, which is already gives it some consideration. One of the problems, so Experimental Frenzy is completely broken in that mono red deck that can just play 5 cards a turn. But there's a vulnerability with that card. Like if you're playing, when I was playing Drakes against mono red, for example, I would want them to play an Experimental Frenzy so that I could then play a Crackling Drake, and then they have to top deck multiple removal spells to kill it, or they're just dead. Where this card doesn't put you under that kind of constraint. So this is like a card advantage engine, without sort of limiting your ability to respond to whatever is happening in the game, which I kind of like. But yeah, it's got its advantages and disadvantages in comparison, but I think it's a good card.
One of the things that's interesting to me is, you know, I look at what do I want from a Rakdos deck? And it is actually similar to the things that I wanted from that mono red deck, right? Where it's like kind of the cards that are best with this are going to be cheap burn spells, right? Maybe not. Maybe creatures are better. You know what?
I think you want a consistent source of damage more than you want a burn spell. But
well, so when I say that, if I have a cheap burn spell, and my deck is full of cheap burn spells, then it's really easy for me to play a land, make that land more mana to play more burn spells. I don't know. I'm starting to like, as I was finishing my sentence, I felt like maybe I'm questioning myself, because with Experimental Frenzy, the reason I was bringing it up is because with Experimental Frenzy, you really like reactive stuff. You really like instants to be on top of your deck and things like that. Because you can do it on your upkeep. You can do different things with it.
Well, you mostly want like cheap spells with Frenzy, right? You want to play like as many cards in that turn as you can
per turn. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. The more I think about this as I'm talking, they seem so different, and I'm trying to think of what do I want with this card specifically?
I mean, this card plays a little bit like it's obviously it's a different card, but it plays a little bit like Karn in that, you know, you're going to be exiling stuff. You don't necessarily have to use it right away. And then at some point you just minus Karn and get the key spell you want. And that's what you can do here. It's like, yeah, okay, there's a land. There's like, I'll keep doing my normal thing. I'll establish my board presence. Oh, there's like a Doom Whisper I want to play, or a Ravenous Chupacabra. I'm like, all right, well then I'll, you know, shoot my Firebrand at you, play my land, play my Chupacabra, kill your Skargan, Hellkite, or whatever it is, and keep going.
Yeah, that's interesting. Anything else on this one before we go on to the next card there, Seth?
No.
Cool. Well, the next one that we have is one we've talked a lot about already. We have Rhythm of the Wild. This card is 1, a red and a green for an enchantment. Creature spells you control can't be countered. Non-token creatures you control have Riot. Seth?
I love not getting my ooze countered.
Yeah, I mean, I was playing a Prime Speaker Vanifar deck. It was just absurd there because you were able to give your Prime Speaker haste, and literally my whole other deck was creatures. So like I played this against a control deck, and then they were just like had these counter spells in hand, and like all parts of the card were turned on. That may be like an extreme example of it being good, but I'm eager to try it out in straight Gruul decks. There's definitely like its synergy with just playing a big dude and being able to immediately attack, and having your creatures not being able to count. Like I underrated it. Like I just made my top 5, you know, earlier in the day, because like after my stream last night, so I have a little bit of an advantage maybe from John, who made his a little bit earlier than that, and like it's a card I undervalued. Now it's impressed me enough to put it in my top 5. It's an enchantment. yeah, it's like playing something like a Nullhide Ferox or something on 4 and just like slamming in for 7 is, I mean, that seems good for 6 rather if you give it haste. But yeah, it's a strong card. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I think that we've already mentioned a lot about this card, right? Like we have the synergies with Growth Chamber guy. We have it's funny because when we think about this card with even like the dragon that we talked about, you want to put the counter on the dragon from the dragon, but you also want to have a hasty dragon, and this lets you do both. You have, I mean, Ooze is cool because it lets your Ooze be shock protected when it comes into play. It's really interesting to think of like all the Simic cards. You think about this with something like the Incubation Druid. This card certainly does a lot, and it certainly seems like they designed this card to give counters for a reason. So
I will say that, like you're talking about their development process, they've been very careful to say non-token a lot of these cards, which kind of indicates to me how powerful the ability is. Like both this and Judith don't work with token creatures, right? Because I could see that like being completely. I mean, they took care of it with that clause, but I think like that probably came from development. They probably was like, When you
say Druid, do you mean the Diva?
Yeah.
He said, I think he meant to say Judith. I think that's what he was saying.
What did I say? I don't know what I said, but yeah, Judith. Like they both say non-token creatures, so yeah, imagine playing this with Siege Gang Commander and your tokens getting +1/+1 or just insane, right? But still good with those cards. I think this card's really good.
Cool. Should we go on and wrap up Judith really quick? Because that is also on your list, Seth. We talked about it a little bit, but what really stood out for you?
Yeah, I mean, we already mentioned most of it, but I mean, just having cards that do multiple things. The +1/+0, specifically, I'm thinking about Mardu tokens. That was like, I had 3 of them in my list, and now even though it's legendary, I would think I want to go up to 4. I think at one point we brought up the fact that it can actually like even if you draw multiples, you can just play the other one and you get at least 2 triggers, right? So like, and then cards like Fanatical Firebrand, any type of card that sacrifice outlet. There's so many synergies with it, and then just the fact that, like, it's a 3-mana Lord. Like 3-mana Lords are already pretty solid. Like we think about like the classic one I think of is like Elvish Champion or like whatever it may be. Like there's normally not much more. Like we've seen like 2-mana Lords now, like with Mistbinders and Vampire, but like this is so much more than a Lord. Yeah, I would pick them up at $8. Like that is how confident I am that it's going to be good.
It's really interesting that you talk about Firebrand because when I saw this card and I thought about Firebrand, first of all I thought about the fact that it turns your Firebrands into shocks, which is already good. And then I was like, not only does it do that, but if I play a Firebrand on an empty board, it turns it into a Goblin Guide with like no downside, which is like already insane. Like this, I agree. I think this card is like the more I think about this, the better it is. So, John, anything you want to say on it one more time?
No, I mean, we talked about Judith a lot. I think it's very good. I agree with all you guys, with both of you guys.
Wilderness Reclamation, the card that was already called for bannings. We have 3 and a green for an enchantment. Beginning of your end step, untap all lanes you control.
Yeah, so this was another one that I initially wasn't sure how good it would be. And then not only did I try it, but I played against it. And turns out that if you thought Fog was good, now it's really good. Like what it does in that deck is pretty disgusting. So I'm hoping that Fog is not too good because I don't like playing Fog. I don't want to play Fog at a big tournament personally, and I don't want it to be the best deck. But just Bant Nexus, Bant Fog, whatever you want to call it. I even saw just a blue-green version of that deck. I think Ifro and Andrew Cunha were playing it, which is like without the Teferis. Now you can just like go off, just like have a Reclamation, and you can just like combo off with just that. And I mean, it allows you to turn 5 combo relatively easily with Fog. But beyond that, I was actually trying an Assaulti deck, just like cards that you want to like tap a bunch of mana. Like I had Disinformation Campaign in the deck. I had Chemist's Insights. I had all of this stuff that was very mana intensive and would allow me to keep having plays throughout the game and like just being able to use essentially double mana. Like because those are instants, it just doubles your mana for each turn almost. It's almost the equivalent of that, and it was much better than I thought it would be.
I'm a little surprised that this card exists for kind of a weird reason. If you've ever played any amount of Commander, you actually know that these effects are like really. So I think one of them is banned in Commander, and the last time that we had this effect, I think it was on a blue-green creature, and people still tried to break that creature. Like I don't know. This having a free enchant, like the fact that it's free is kind of, I don't know. I have a feeling we talked how well play design has done, right? And I have a hard time believing they would let this out if it was going to be as good as the community is saying it's going to be. I
don't think they realize the implications of it. That would be my guess.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
if you saw Tom Ross, I don't know if you follow him on Twitter, but he tweeted earlier. His tweet was something along the lines of, it was awesome to see the play design cards in action, like the ones that we thought were going to be good, and then also the ones that we just completely overlooked. It was something along those lines. And immediately I thought, oh, so you didn't test the Willer with this Reclamation decks. Okay.
Yeah,
that's kind of what I read between the lines. Maybe that's not what he meant, but
that would
I mean, they have a hard job to, like, I don't know. We'll see how it plays out.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I wouldn't be so confident that. Well, I mean, I didn't really even seeing this on Seth's list, I was like still not fully appreciating the ramifications of this kind of card. Yeah, it looks pretty good.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the next one. John and I talked about this card a little bit before Seth showed up tonight. We have Prime Speaker Vanifar, is it Vanifar? It's 2 GU for a creature. Elf Ooze Wizard. You can tap it to sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature with a converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrifice creature's converted mana cost and put it onto the battlefield. Then shuffle your library. Activate this only anytime you could cast a sorcery. This card has similar text to a card called Birthing Pod that is banned in Modern. And it is one of the most exciting cards in the set to me, Seth, so I'm really excited to see it on your list.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed playing with it. It allows for some sweet games of Magic, and so like any type of creature-based deck or aggressive deck, you're able to kind of interact with. Then maybe you play this, and if you're able to activate it, it's just absurd. But you're going to build your deck around it so that even if you don't necessarily get a chance to play it and activate it, which won't always happen, your other cards are perfectly reasonable. So yeah. It's a card that I enjoyed playing with, and I think it's pretty good. I don't know if it's going to be it's going to create a top deck in Standard. If decks like Fog and things of that nature that you basically can't possibly interact with. So like if you don't have interactions with Teferi and Nexus and etc., then that's kind of rough. But like other than that, I feel like the deck is super fun to play with. There's some neat combos you can build around. You can build the deck in a few different ways. I think all of the colors are live. Like you definitely at least 3 colors. My version was 4 colors, and there's reasons for all of the color variations. The mana base is a little bit tricky. There's a lot of ETB effects. There's thinking about different cards at each point in the curve, and I enjoyed it. It's really I enjoyed playing with pod decks, and this is a card that stood out to me.
Yeah, so Teamer Pod is Twin Pod specifically in Standard. Right after the Cobblade ban was literally my favorite Standard deck of all time. So this card is one that excites me a lot. One thing that I've seen is with this card that you mentioned is this is also in the colors of some interesting cards. I'm really glad that they kept the sorcery clause on this, because like having this in play with it being able to activate and get like a Frilled Mystic would have sucked.
Yeah, I thought about that, and I thought, oh, I'm going to do this. This seems great. And I saw that.
But it is in the colors of Negate, which is interesting because in the past, that's something that the fog decks have had a lot of trouble with is creature decks with counter spells. So
I mean, you can't really put Prime Speaker and Negate into the same main deck. I don't think.
no,
that's
certainly not in the
tough
same
problem.
main deck. What I'm saying is that like when fog was good before, one of the things that it was really good game 1, and then it would often have really bad game 2s and 3s matchups. It was really easy to like build your deck to try and attack what they were doing. Hopefully, cards like this get to continue to do that with things like Negate.
Well, Spencer, I care about ranking up right now, and so for the next 2 weeks, I only care about best of 1.
I was gonna say in 2 weeks you can do that on best of 3. So, John, what about you? What are your thoughts on this card? We talked about it a little bit, but I wanted to let you say the things that you said
most
before.
important part of this card is that it gets a +1/+1 counter from my biogenic ooze.
I didn't even notice that.
I didn't notice that till right now, since I have the text of the card in front of me. It's a tribal ooze. I don't understand exactly what an elf ooze wizard is, so I tried to pull up the picture and I don't see the ooze on it. But anyway, the card. I was watching streams yesterday, as I mentioned. This is a card that I saw and play a few times. Impressed me. I'm not sure. Like, do you guys think it's going to be? Is it a combo card or is it just going to be a value card? Right now, I feel like it's a pretty good value card, where you're just like upgrading all your creatures, and it's a 2/4. It's not that easy to kill.
I don't think there's any like huge combo per se with it. Like you're just upgrade, but like it's still real. It's really good whenever you activate it because you're always gonna have like the way you build your deck. You're probably gonna put like creatures that you don't mind sacrificing in it. So it's just kind of like a deck building, a way of approaching deck building. Like if you're putting Militia Bugle or Branch Walker or like explore creatures like Branch Walker and Jade Light, or if you're putting Siege Gang or like whatever like it may be at different points in the curve, like you're playing these creatures so that you actually want to sacrifice them. And that, I don't know if you call that combo or if you just call it value. To me, it's like a little bit of both. It's not like, all right, I can sack this and then like I get a 2-card combo like a Felidar Guardian or whatever, and I just win or something. But
yeah, it feels a bit like a Planeswalker to me. Is like this is a card that is going to provide a good benefit every turn that they let it live, but it won't necessarily just automatically win you the game. But like it's going to be a good effect. But yeah, I think this card. I did not originally picture this card as being good enough for standard, but I think I was wrong.
One of the things that actually, before I say that, why do you say that?
Why do I say that I was wrong?
Yeah.
Well, I think it like just the interaction, just Jadelight Ranger. If you play this with Jadelight Ranger, I mean, turning that creature into something, that's going to impact the game a lot more once it's in play is like a huge upgrade. And, I think that a lot of decks, like if you're playing a sort of like a matchup where things are going slowly, like Seth was playing with, I was watching you play with Elenda, for example, and you were talking about how that card was, pretty bad in some matchups, but in any matchup where like you're just establishing a board presence, it just gets completely out of hand. This feels a lot like that to me. Is like in any sort of game where like you're both doing your thing and no one's killing each other, and you get to play turns after turns. Like this is going to be a really big card in that matchup. Yep. So I think it's going to see some play. Maybe I hope so. It looks cool.
So one of the things that I think of when I see this card, I like to think back to like how the Bant pod deck, the Rug pod deck, looked in Standard, right? And one of the things that deck did, it was Birds of Paradise and Avacyn's Pilgrim or Llanowar Elves directly into Birthing Pod. And one of the funny things, we already talked about Incubation Druid. Like our Birds of Paradise that we just got, our first one in a long time, basically, that taps for multiple colors of mana, goes directly into this. So it'll be interesting to see, the 2 to 4 instead of 1 to 3, and how that impacts the speed of the deck. But I would expect that you should be playing some number of ramp creatures to get this card out earlier.
Well, I mean, I think probably want to stick Llanowar Elves in every single green deck.
Yeah, that's fair too.
But yeah, it does play really well with Incubation Druid too. So.
All right, well, let's go to your next card, Seth, which is my favorite card in the entire set. Wait,
if it was your favorite card, how is it not in your top 5? Or was it in your top 5?
It's not Gruul.
It's not Gruul.
Oh, it's not Gruul, right? You were doing just Gruul. All right, go ahead. Yeah.
It was in my fun fact. The 2 Simic cards that were in my top 5, before I
Yeah.
switched it to Gruul were Brine Speaker and this one. We have Hydroid Krasis. It is X, green, and a blue. It's a creature jellyfish beast. Jellyfish Hydra beast, sorry. And it has, when you cast this spell, you gain X life and draw X cards, rounded down each time. Half of that. And then it has flying and trample, and then it enters the battlefield with X/1/1 counters. I cast this card 7 times today, by the way. Oh my gosh, it is my dream come true, Seth.
It's a fun card. Yeah, it's great. I mean, I immediately thought ramp or some type of Simic. I mean, obviously it's a Simic card, so you're playing Simic, but the counter synergy in Simic is kind of cool too. But I mean, like it works really nicely in these mid-range big mana decks. It's just super fun to cast it and have a card that is like draws you more cards and gains life and is a big dude and it's a flyer, and I think it's good enough. The power level is good enough. It's not broken. I think we've already mentioned it in previous casts, but I like it. Yeah, I think it's a great. Like if you're a ramp deck, it just like put 4 of these in your deck. Do yourself a favor. Like make things easy on yourself.
I think it's really cool that like we're talking about all these cards that we think have potential, and like they kind of all go in different decks. And there's like 5 new decks coming out of the set already. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that one of the most I think we talked about this on this cast, but like one of the biggest things the ramp decks needs are bridge spells, and the fact that the worst case scenario for this card is that it's a bridge spell for your ramp deck is so sweet. Like it like if you need to like gain a life, put a blocker out, draw a card to dig you deeper to like get to whatever point you need in the game, it's pretty sweet that this card gets to do that. But Seth, it's on your list, and so you cast this card. Would you say it met expectations, or was above them or below them?
It was definitely. I thought it was gonna be good, and it was good. Like I don't know if it was that much better than I thought it was gonna be because I already had pretty high expectations for it. But I like X spells, and to have another good one, I feel like that's exactly like it's perfect. It's good. Yeah.
Seraph of the Scales. This card is 2, a white and a black. It's a creature angel. It has flying. It has an active ability of a white to give it vigilance, activated ability of a black to give it death touch, and it has afterlife 2, so when it dies, you can create 2 1/1 white and black spirit tokens with flying. Seth, why is this on your list?
Is this by the way, it doesn't say your nose. Is this a 4/3? Is that just
4/3 flyer?
It is.
Yeah.
It is a 4/3. I'm so sorry. That's my bad.
Well, 4 mana 4/3 flyer. It's an angel, so it's got some tribal synergy with cards like Lyra Dawnbringer. And it's just like if you kill it and it's not with a burn spell, it's just like it can trade up for a creature. It has flying. It makes 2 dudes for 4 mana. It's just like above the power. Like it's just like a card that's like, okay, this should only have afterlife 1. Like, would it still be good? Yes, I think it would still be like a reasonable card with only afterlife 1. And it's just like, should it really have death touch? Should it really have this or that? Like, isn't that a little bit too good? Like, isn't that a little bit too much? It is a mythic, and you do want to make your mythics high power level. So it reminds me a lot of the cards like a Lyra, like a high power level flyer that is just a really good card on its own. Like you can argue that any white black deck should be considering it just because of the raw power level. And it's been, I've liked it.
You played with this yesterday? It was good?
Yeah, I played him in Mardu Angels. So it was especially strong in that deck. I liked it more than Shalai because I had Aurelia and this, but just because, I liked it, yeah.
I guess the reason I was not initially high on this card is just the poor matchup against Rekindling Phoenix. And I get that you get the 2 spirits, but those play badly against Chain Whirler. Like I just feel like it has some tough matchup situations against the red decks.
Well, Rekindling Phoenix is a card that no creature really matches up with particularly well against, is how I feel. It's more of a card that you either have to have you have to have some other way of answering it.
Well, like for example, I don't know if I agree with that because, okay, so like it stands off creatures very well, but you don't really want to chump block with your Phoenix because then it can just die to a single removal spell. Like I think Lyra, for example, is Rekindling Phoenix kind of matches up poorly against Lyra. I also think against like Biogenic Ooze, like Rekindling Phoenix is not good enough. Just stuff like that, like this. But even that's all fine. Like, I mean, this could still be a very good card in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like but I could say in the same vein, like you attack with a Seraph, and then you at least are getting 2/1 flyers. So you're not just 2-for-1ing yourself like some of the other creatures. Like you attack, they block, right? And then you still get the 2 dudes, and maybe you do have to use a removal spell to then get the Phoenix off the board, but it's still not like the end of the world, I feel.
Doom Whisper is another card that like I think is good against Phoenix, and probably it's not as good against this. This is pretty good against Doom Whisper, I think. But
yeah, I mean it's certainly not amazing against Phoenix. I agree with that. But I like it. It's been good for me. So.
It is interesting that we mentioned Phoenix twice on this cast as something that maybe it's being underplayed right now. So I mean it probably is, but
that's the nature of it, right? Like they come up with a whole bunch of new cards and people want to play them, and then.
Yeah, you have to compare them to the cards that we already know are very good. We know Phoenix is very good.
Well, not only that, but we're talking about how cards line up against Phoenix, which is a card that has seen a decline in play over, like, compared to where it was a couple months ago.
I think that's something we saw, like, with Glorybringer, for example, whereas, like, it just completely warps the power and toughness ratios that are important. And I think Phoenix sort of does the same thing. It's also interesting that they're printing a bunch of 4/3s, and, like, there are some burn spells that do 3 damage, and that's worth, considering. Like maybe this was a 4/4 at some point, and now but it's still quite good as a 4/3.
Yep. All right, well that will do it for this week's episode. Don't forget to go to patreon.com/ccmtg, become a patron of the show. We get some tokens made of Seth Manfield, John Stern, and Seth Mansfield. If you want a evil mustache Seth, you can find me at Spencer38. You can find Seth at Seth Manfield, and John at John Stern MTL on Twitter. If you want to follow the podcast, it's at ccmtg. You can join the conversation in our Discord, or if you're a patron of $12 or more per month, that's just $3 an episode. Go to patreon.com/ccmg. You can become one of our constructed critics and have access to all those things that we talked about earlier in the show. Seth used those deck lists on the Patreon. We'll have a special episode for those people coming up before the Pro Tour, stuff like that. So patreon.com/ccmtg for that. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up, guys?
I mean, I'm just really excited to start playing Standard, and that's like pretty rare for me. Usually I want to learn limited format and wait a couple weeks and see what shows up in tournaments. But yeah, there's a lot of decks I'm interested in trying. So
yeah, I'm excited. I'm just feeling really good about Magic right now. So this set is so far so good. Yeah.
I've never been so excited for Magic, I don't remember the last time I felt this excited, so I'm with you, Seth. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you guys all next week with another episode of Constructive Criticism.
All right, thanks.